Hello, I'm Pia Renada. Welcome to Rappler. Today we're talking to Father Jose Ramon Villarin, also known as Father Jett Villarin, President of Ateneo de Manila University and the contributing author to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Assessment Reports. He is also part of the advisory board of the Climate Change Commission, and in 2001 edited a book titled Disturbing Climate. Today he will talk about the many ways climate change affects us, people from all walks of life, people all over the world. Last week, the Philippines topped the Global Climate Risk Index 2015, a list of countries most affected by climate change. This week, the United Nations Climate Change Conference wraps up in Lima, Peru, as the Philippines begins to recover from Typhoon Ruby. Good day, sir. Thank you for joining us. So let's start with the basics of climate change.
Sure.
How would you explain climate change to someone who isn't an environmentalist or a scientist?
Well, I begin by telling people that the warmth of the planet is not just because of the sun. We are warmed. If the sun were the only one warming us, we would actually be very cold, given the distance from the sun or the planet's distance. But we are warmed because of this blanket of gases. We call them greenhouse gases. The most famous is water vapor. But of course, water vapor is something that's hard to control. The other major greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide. And with carbon dioxide, we've been warming. We've increased our emissions of carbon, and this has, in effect, resulted in a warmer climate. It used to be a theoretical question. Back in the 19th century, scientists asked, what if we doubled carbon dioxide? What would happen? But now we know, at least we're seeing, that doubling or at least increasing that level will actually warm up the planet faster than we could imagine.
Okay. And sir, for the second year in a row, we've seen the UN Climate Change Conferences happening, and last year they happened with Yolanda also. So Yolanda kind of put the spotlight on climate change while the conference was happening. And this year, the conference in Peru is happening alongside Ruby. So can you just explain to us again what the connection is between typhoons and climate change?
Yes, that's sometimes a tenuous connection. Well, because climate, how do you say this? Climate is average weather. So if the average increases, one particular weather disturbance does not actually prove the point, right?
Yeah.
Although, of course, if the average is increasing, then you'd see more of these extreme things happening. For example, if the average age of a group is increasing, then one particular individual may not really tell you the entire picture. But if repeated sampling is done, then you realize, maybe the average is skewed. And that's what we're seeing now, actually. We're looking for a longer time series, and we're seeing, more instances that the average is changing, that climate is changing. So with Yolanda and now Ruby and all these other super typhoons, well, there will also be instances when you will not see anything, right? But there will be more instances when this so-called new normal will manifest itself. So that's in a sense what makes it a little tricky, because of the nature of the beast itself, climate, which is just the average, the pattern of all these occurrences. Another thing that we will expect is, aside from the average moving, we might expect greater swings.
Swings in terms of
temperature, ferocity of the typhoon, even temperature. I mean, hot and cold. That's why sometimes when you say, it's cold, it's very cold, the globe must not be warming. It's not true, actually. There is a relationship. It's like a swing. When there's more energy in the system, then you can swing, the amplitude, the length the amplitude is bigger, and therefore you'll get more swings in the weather.
So when climate deniers say that there's actually global cooling, it's not right to deny climate change that way, or is that what you're saying?
Well, again, that's an average. See, I think what we've been seeing is that there will be more warmer nights. More in terms of frequency of warm nights. there'll be nights that are cold. Nights are usually cold, right? But then the warm nights might increase more. And that's not good actually for certain things like even rice.
Yeah.
Our rice scientists have discovered that nighttime temperatures are crucial for rice productivity.
Yeah, so transitioning to that, because we've drawn the tenuous connection between typhoons and climate change. So now, what other impacts can we expect climate change to have on other aspects of our daily life? Like, for example, how will it affect food?
Oh yes, well, how will it affect food? Well, food relies on, how would you say, the faithfulness of the seasons, right? That they come year in, year out, they're there, the rains come at a certain time of the year. What is worrisome is that when things become unpredictable.
Right.
I don't think summer will become winter. That's a drastic thing, but the onset of summer or the length of the winter season or the rainy season, that will change. And that's not good if you're planning. There are other things that worry us, especially the ocean. You know, the warmth of the planet is not just for human beings. It actually controls circulation, the currents. And if those currents change, wind and sea currents, then fish population, fish productivity
Which is
will
food,
change.
yeah.
Yes,
Also
that's
food security.
I find the ocean more worrisome because it's harder to, how do you cool the ocean? I mean, you can put blocks of ice. When the coral reefs die because the oceans are too warm or too acidic because of the carbon, then we will see fish population decrease. It's not good for us because we depend a lot on aquaculture.
So, sir, what kinds of food are the most affected by climate change?
I would say the seasonals, well, rice.
Rice, which is a staple.
Yeah, it's rain-fed. Well, our rice is also irrigation-fed, but where do you think the water from irrigation comes? It comes from the sky.
From typhoons.
from the clouds. And we just hope to God that those clouds don't move out. You know, that they continue to form and well, at least pour down rain that's enough, not too much, because too much rain will also snuff out the life out of this plant. So.
And sir, I also read that climate change can also affect peace and national security. Can you elaborate more on that aspect?
Well, people fight over resources. Water can be a flashpoint. So water and land, usually. So yes, we need to be mindful of the climate sensitivity of human security as well. Maybe not so here in the Philippines, because I think for now at least we do see a lot of abundance. I mean, there's green all over, but in certain continents like Africa, for instance, water will be a flashpoint.
So, sir, can you paint us a picture of a world where climate change has already taken its toll? How does it look like? The worst case scenario.
Oh, gosh. Worst case scenario. If this is really bad, we're gone. We have a preview in Venus.
In Venus.
Venus is carbon, is sulfuric acid. It had a runaway greenhouse effect a long time ago. It warmed up. It's about 900 degrees. We're gone.
So Earth can be like Venus.
Well,
in a way.
That's the worst case. Worst
Okay.
case. I don't want to depress people because there is hope.
Okay.
We can learn. We can learn from this. It's a sister planet. We learned about the ozone hole also by studying our sister planet. We know about our galaxy because of our sister galaxy, Andromeda. So we look at our sisters. So here, if we know what happened to Venus, we hope that we can at least learn.
And then, because the problem of climate change, especially when you want to enable people to understand it and really understand the urgency of the situation, the effects of it are kind of in the long term, at least in many people's mindsets. It won't affect them, it'll probably affect the third generation, so it's not really something they're thinking of at the moment. What kind of time frame are we looking at? Like, how soon can we expect the worst case scenario, or how soon can we expect the worst impacts to to take their toll?
Worst case, yeah, is quite long term.
Okay.
It's beyond this century. We can accelerate, although those effects this century. What the world is trying to do in Peru and in Paris someday is to try to slow it down to within 2 degrees of warming. It's like the human body, you know, you're 37, you've taken that for granted. You're 37 degrees constant. Once you get a 2-degree fever, then you realize, oh, I took for granted the 37 degrees. Right? There is a reason why there is a fever. We're trying to maintain that temperature to 2 degrees. Why? Because I think within 2 degrees, things are still manageable, reversible. We don't want irreversible things setting in place, getting into high gear, and then where you have, I guess, where it becomes more difficult. A case in point is what we learned with the ozone case, the ozone layer. We discovered in the 80s that it was boring a hole. You know? It was just a tiny substance called chlorine, you know, in our coolants, you know, in our propellants. And we said, well, stop it. Well, we did in Montreal Protocol. We did in the early 1990s, and it's still there. Okay, why? Because the chlorine will be there for the next 50 to 100 years.
But we were able to stop at least,
Oh, yes.
you know. So there's hope for climate change to also be stopped.
Yes, yes.
Given
yes.
that experience.
I think governments everywhere will see, look, this is foolish to go on this trajectory. A carbon fueled growth is not the way to go. It depletes our resources. It threatens our survival. So.
What other effects of climate change aren't in the headlines, but which you think people might be taking for granted, like other impacts that aren't so noticeable now, but could be a big deal in the future?
Oh, well, I think they're all related. What you do for climate, or what you do for the environment, you also do for the climate. So, you know, even a simple act of cleanup, solving traffic.
Oh, how does that relate?
Oh, well, because one of the big spenders, you know, one of the biggest culprits is energy, really, energy and transport. So, we move. When we move our people, when we move ourselves from place to place, we use carbon. When we light up our facilities, cool our places, we use up carbon. So I think conservation, more efficient usage of these appliances will help protect the climate, will also help sustain our economy. So I think we need to be more creative. Land makes a big difference, you know, the way we use our land. And we've actually been remiss in the way we use our land.
So how should society change the way we use land?
Well, first, we have to have clear policies. Where do you put your market? Where do you put your church, your school? Because that determines how you will use your fuel, how you will move people. We've sort of been, I'd say, I guess, remiss in planning these things. Our growth, even as a city, has been quite incremental. I think we need to be more strategic. We need to make choices. I've said this often enough, I think. For a country of 100 million people, 2 or 3 cities, then that's not enough, right?
So we need to spread the growth
Yes.
to like 20 cities that are more efficient.
Yeah. Decentralize. We're so centered here, and we're so afraid to set up shop in other places, and part of it is there's an infrastructure bottleneck. So I hope we can have real stateswomen who can plan this beyond their political lifetimes.
And sir, because climate change is such a macro issue, it's always about, you know, on the international level, about state officials or policymakers. How can regular people who don't really participate in the negotiations, who don't really study climate change, how can they help? How can they help at least slow down climate change?
Well, yes, most of what we hear is really at the top level, right? And I would encourage bottom up approaches. Really, many of these things sometimes it's much more difficult to get agreements at the top level than it is to get them at the rank and file level, at the level of communities.
What concrete ways can communities, maybe lifestyle changes, perhaps? Or
Yes. Well, lifestyle changes, pressure groups, so that certain policies can actually be executed. We're trying to do our best, for example, in our little way in our campus, trying to encourage people to walk again. Try not to bring your car if you can. Try to carpool when you can. Encourage bikes. I know is it a pipe dream? Well, I think we can build this in a little corridor here where you have Miriam, UP, Ateneo working together, so that piece of space can be breathable, can be.
And then that can become like a case study, a model for other cities to replicate.
I hope so.
And
yeah.
hopefully multiplier effect.
Yes. Of course, what you do inside is not enough, really. You know that once you start cleaning up your own little area, then you realize, oh boy, this is a big problem. Then you realize you have to bring in the decision makers as well. It's not enough to just clean up your own house. You have to clean up a community. Yeah, you have to organize, which is happening. I think there are allied groups working on this. So.
And then, sir, last question. Because people right now, they believe that climate change won't affect them at the moment. Like, it's a very long-term problem, and these typhoons come and go, and they can survive it as best they can. Why then should people who live today care about what happens to people who will end up suffering the most from climate change, maybe centuries from now or 50 years from now? Why should we care?
Well, I remember when the ozone issue erupted, I said, why should we care? That's just in the South Pole. They're just, penguins there. Why should we worry about a hole being made out there? And of course, people ask, so we should not worry about the Australians or the ones in New Zealand. Or I think what this issue has done is to bring us together and made us rediscover our humanity. That yes, we may not be affected, but downstream it's our children and our children's children. I think it's not. Would it be selfish to think that way? That survival now and let them worry later. I think that's something that is not good for us. It has forced us to care for not just each other, but for the future. And that's the challenge, actually, this
Exactly,
issue.
because to think outside your own existence, far away, it's sort of a challenge for people right now who can't really think ahead. I mean, they can barely plan their next week, right, sometimes. So.
Right. And that's why I think it's incumbent on those who can think forward, especially leaders, because right now it's really a subsistence mentality. Isang kahig, isang tuka. I don't even know what I'm going to eat later.
Exactly.
And so for those who can and who have the will, who have been given more, I think it's incumbent upon us to think for them and to think ahead. Who will think ahead? And I think it would be leaders like you and me, leaders in various sectors who will exercise that compassion for others.
So for you, climate change is an issue of compassion, it's not just scientific jargon. It boils down to really us caring for the future.
Yes, it's an ethical issue. It's a human issue. It's a spiritual issue. So what has happened is crisis. I mean, it's a crisis of the human spirit also. But now I think it's not hopeless, because then we're being challenged. Say, look, you have a choice. We can destroy this garden, or we can make this garden flourish. And it's up to us.
Thank you so much, Father, for your time.
Oh,
So understanding
welcome,
climate.
yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Father.
see,
Understanding climate change is not only the work of scientists and environmentalists, it's the work of each and every person. We've been talking to IPCC scientist and Ateneo de Manila President, Father Jett Villarin. I'm P. Renada. Thank you for watching.